Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and just tell me what they do all day and let me record how this affects us. Thank you for listening. What did you want to be when you grew up?
It's an interesting question. I was thinking about that. Different phases of my life during childhood, but I think the one that sticks out to me the most is some kind of international hotshot lawyer who can speak so many different languages. I don't know what I must have been watching on TV at the time, but I just wanted to be up there in the corporate world, making lots of money, helping almost this kind of, the Robin Hood kind of thing, and making this money and then supporting and helping others. So yeah, I think that's what sticks out to me, being this hotshot lawyer.
I like that it's a hot shot as well. Did you have big shoulder pads in this imagination?
I'm born in the 80s. Oh, you're right. I heard just talking to you now, and I'm kind of visualizing sort of the idea of how I will have been dressed, how I would have presented myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite comical and quite cute, really.
There was a lot of law content in the 80s there, like LA Law, I remember being huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even like with the stuff like Agatha Christie's Poirot and Columbo and all these things, although they were like detectives, but there's something about this, there's this lawyer who's, gonna get justice. I'm all about justice.
Yeah, and
that's what it is. I'm all about justice.
You're listening to Series 5, Episode 43, and to my guest, Tayba Azim. This is another Squadcast interview recorded on the 17th of December, 2024. Hello, listener. Tayba Azim runs her own private practice in counselling and psychotherapy, organises and facilitates psycho-spiritual retreats, and provides Mizan Therapy, womb healing techniques to address conditions of the reproductive organs, emotional health, and unresolved trauma. With over 15 years of experience in mental health, domestic abuse, and trauma, she focuses on supporting women all over the world, of all ages, especially the South Asian community, particularly Muslim women, and those that are neurodiverse. Tayba employs an Islamically-informed approach in her counselling, tailored to her clients' needs, educating Muslim women about their rights within Islam. She empowers women to own and reclaim their menstrual cycle and rights within a capitalist society, helping to dismantle the guilt and shame imposed by patriarchy, culture, and colonialism. In this episode, we discuss all those issues, including Tayba's own experiences, and we discuss what brought her into her current work. We do touch on domestic violence, but we don't go into detail. Right, let's do this. Episode 153 of Working Hours with Tayba Azim. Okay, so we'll jump straight into what are you doing now then?
So it's interesting. I'm a psychotherapist and counsellor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a womb wellness practitioner, a Mizan practitioner. Now, what do they have to do with justice, I guess? But they do. a lot. It's interesting. There's something about, again, with mental health, with women and their health, we're seeing of recently, that there's a lot of focus around women's health now, and how we've kind of been sidelined, or research hasn't been conducted with women's health, considering, we are the ones who have periods, and we're the ones who end up pregnant, and this, we bear these children, but not much significance is given to us in that sense. So there is something about, in relation to that sort of justice, is about women reclaiming their bodies, who they are, and some of that sort of psychoeducation that goes with it around patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, culture, religion. So yeah, I bring that into the mix of what I do in psychotherapy and Mizan.
Okay, so I won't go fully into, I won't kind of pry that apart at the moment, but I'll jump to the next question of how you got into it. So I assume you started in psychology, psychiatry generally, and then narrowed down. You're shaking your head, so.
No, I didn't. So what I might add here is, for me, being a Muslim, faith is really, really important and crucial with my sort of personal professional life in that sense. So I hold it really dear to me, and it informs where I'm going next in that sense and what I'm doing. So just with that in mind, I do believe that it's my personal experiences and lived experiences that have actually brought me to where I am now. As I said, I think given when I was potentially 15, I had thoughts of, I'm going to go to university, and then I'm going to do a year abroad, and I'm going to study Spanish and Arabic. I just have a love for languages. But also with that, do I actually want to go into law or journalism? So this is as I'm in my teens. So that's where I was headed. But I believe God had other plans for me, and I became a carer for my mum. So that's where things, I guess, shifted, but I never questioned it. I'm always, I still am quite a go-getter, but I'm never questioning, well, why not that? Why not what I wanted to do? I feel that this path has been chosen for me, and I was open to that. I'd never resisted it, I think.
So you were at university, you became a carer. Was it full-time care that you had to go into? Were you able to continue the studies, or did you have to drop out and come back?
I didn't even make it to uni at the time.
Right, okay.
I was doing my GCSEs, and I did the best I could. I was often, people would say I'm really intelligent and like this teacher's pet and whatnot. So in terms of the reflection of the grades, I was expecting more than what I ended up getting, but that's because my focus and attention was mostly on my mum, who at the time was for a year was clinically depressed, and her kidneys had gone as well. So this was going on. Nobody in school knew that there was stuff going on at home. I passed, got my GCSEs, and decided I'll try and do my A-levels in the hope that, mum might get better. But and I kid you not, and I don't exaggerate this when I say that in that 2 to 3 years, although it was, for 14 years, but just in the time where I'm at school, I'm speaking about, there was not a month or two where we were not preparing for her funeral. We were always making that sort of arrangements and whatnot. She ended up with septicemia. We were told, 24 hours are critical and expect the worst. And where she was having dialysis, that would get infected, and therefore they weren't so sure where else they could, operate on her and put this line in. So those 2 years of my A-levels, I mostly spent away from school, and I would try. But eventually, when I did the exams, I didn't pass any of them, but I didn't think anything of it. In the interim, I got a job at St. James's as a ward clerk. So again, that sort of helping profession, I thought I'd work my way up. I ended up getting married, and then had children. So we've got a gap of, a good 5 to 7 years now of no study, no work, etc. And then, well, what I might add here is I feel so dramatic speaking about all of this. I ended up going through domestic violence, and it nearly I almost lost my life. So that was that sort of turning point as well. So here I now am. Mum's being looked after, but again, we're kind of always preparing for her funeral. I'm a single mum now. House is almost about to be repossessed because my ex had taken a loan out, which I was unaware of. And then it was like, right, what do I do? How do I manage this? I don't have A levels. I don't know how to communicate in English anymore. It's just baby language.
Yeah.
Where's my intelligence gone? I know nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole use it or lose it, isn't it? And if you're just inside, just with one person, I mean, it's like having a baby, isn't it? So, except at least you can get a bit more sense out of your mum than a baby.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then because of the nature of the relationship I was in, I lost my identity and my own self-esteem in that, and my own confidence. It's like, well, who am I?
Yeah. And trust in yourself, trust in your own ability to judge people, and
absolutely. And then come 2007, my divorce finalizes, both with, I'm going to add here that I had to go through what's called the Sharia Council for an Islamic divorce. And then also the civil divorce. So these came through, the Islamic one came through, I think in 2006, and then the civil one came through around 2007. And by this time, I managed to secure a job with Barclays Bank. But then I had to leave because of childcare, and they weren't very helpful either. In terms of, I'd put in an application for me to not be working over the weekends because of my children. I was a lone parent. Another young girl put her application in, hers got approved, mine didn't, and I thought, that's injustice, because I was on good terms with this young lady. At the time, she was just as shocked as I was. It was like, well, they should have approved yours. I wouldn't have minded. I put that in, and I felt that's really unfair. So I did. I had to leave. But again, as I mentioned before, I believe everything happens for a reason. I left, and 3 months later, within those 3 months, I was looking after my mum, spending a lot more time with her, but she then passed away. So I had the 3 months with her, but before she passed away, she kind of had this conversation. She said, I feel really, really gutted that, because of me, due to my circumstances, you have not been able to study. You've not been able to kind of, do the things you wanted to do, go to uni, because that was a passion of mine. I really wanted to, know.
And as a parent, like, you can imagine that be a killer. Like, that must be awful. Like, especially, as a parent who obviously cares, like, that's an awful experience for her to go through as well, on top of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of guilt. And she, so I kind of went, oh no, Mum, I'm going to get myself into uni. Don't you worry. You stay put, and I'm going to get myself into uni. And then I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to get myself into uni? How am I going to do this? So there were like these access courses, and I was like, oh, I'm almost 28 now. What am I going to be doing with these 19-year-olds at college? Because again, like I said, I knew nothing at this point.
Showing them a thing or two. That's what you'll be doing.
Guess what? I did go to uni.
Good.
Because they had a foundation course that they only started the year before. So when I can't remember who I called up, and says, oh yeah, this is foundation course, and you can start immediately at uni, and you can then do whatever degree you want to do. Like, this is surreal. So filled my application, the timing is of the essence. I got offered I got offered to go onto this foundation course
Mm.
in social sciences. By this time, we've heard from the consultants now that there is nowhere where they can put the line in for my mum, and there's no kidney transplant. Mum didn't want that in anyway,
Mm.
and that we have either got 10 hours, 12 hours, a couple of days, we don't know. So as I've kind of gone through this, and I said to her mum, I says, I'm going to uni. I says, in September, I will be going to uni, and that's what I'm going to be doing. But if I had to live this lifetime 100 times over, I would, because I won't get you, but I will, there's different routes to studying and to get to where I want to be. And, life is what I'll make it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just so pleased. I think it was literally a day or two later she passed away. So everything I've done in honour of her. When I've studied, when I've got that undergrad degree, when I've got that PG diploma, it's always with her in mind, and to honour her. So yeah, that's how I ended up at uni with the children so young. As they would do their exams and study, I would be doing mine. So it was very, it was interesting.
It's nice to be learning with other people, though, like when you're, different people in the household and you're all in that, and you've got your learning brain on.
Yes.
So you're open to all of these ideas and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going into university, did you have a plan for coming out? Did you have a trajectory sort of planned out? Are you now like, right, I'm going to be that activist lawyer now, here I come world?
Activist, definitely. I think because of my personal experiences, activist, definitely. Whatever that I would apply it to whatever job or role I would have, or career. And so I do. I mean, I said I'm a psychotherapist, but I am what one would call an activist psychotherapist. Because what goes on in the room is in direct correlation to what's going on in the outside world as well. So I bring that in. But in terms of so I ended up doing foundation in social policy, social sciences. I was going to, I thought, okay, next best thing, become a social worker. I had no idea what being a social worker actually involved, if I'm honest with you. I just thought, again, helping and, being there and doing good. Until reality hit me, I was like, oh, this is what social work is. And then one of our tutors or lecturers, I remember we were sat in the lecture theatre, and she's like, you will have come here with an idea of what you want to be and what you want to do, but I guarantee you will leave here not doing the thing you came to do. It's like, no, I don't want to be a social worker. Well, no, clearly that didn't happen. I went on to do social policy and crime. So I didn't do the undergrad social work degree. So social policy and crime. It was so still somewhere along the lines of, crime, criminals. And then came through that. There was a gap for about 3 years. Once I'd finished my undergrad degree, I secured a job with what's Samara Living Centre, a mental health project, which was funded for about a year by Times Change. So I left my temporary sort of job with EE, came into this role, and then from there, much of my work ended up being around mental health. It ended up being around being an activist and an educator, especially so for women, but especially there was a branch that I felt was my calling as well, and I still do that to this day, is working with Muslim women who perhaps don't actually know what their rights in Islam are truly. And so because of my experiences and because I had to do a lot of research around it, it opened my eyes, my mind, my heart to, Islam is very much protective of me as a woman. It very much gives me so many rights. But why is the narrative so different? What have I experienced? So then I've spoken to scholars and whatnot, and it's like, oh, okay. But if I am born and bred here in this country, I've got a decent level of education, and, I've ended up going through this process. I've experienced, difficulties with mental health, whether that's postnatal depression, whether that's my mum having gone through, clinical depression, domestic violence, and this, what I would call spiritual abuse, this patriarchal spiritual abuse.
Sorry. I thought I'd turn that off. So go on. Sorry.
So this, with this sort of spiritual abuse, and I thought, right, if I don't know it to the extent that I do now, then how many other women, are living through life through this lens? Well, I might add that, the way my dad had taught us and the way he brought us up was very much, there was a balance there, and he hadn't treated us any different, even if I'm coming from South Asian community, a Muslim woman. But there was so much that I guess we hadn't learned or got a chance to learn and understand. And again, I would also say that my dad's understanding, whilst he had some kind of understanding of Islam, he didn't fully, because again, when I've looked back historically, all these, these books, the literature, mostly written by men, and it comes from a different lens. But when I've gone back to the basics of the Quran and proper learned scholars, oh my God, there's all this information, there's all these rights, and we know nothing. So then I started working for Leeds Mind and Mine in Bradford. But with Leeds Mind, I developed a sort of a project where I'm reaching out to South Asian women and community, and that is part and parcel of what I do now as well, in terms of some of the teaching and presentations that I do around how do you work with Muslim women, how do you work with the South Asian community, and, what their rights are. So yeah, that's how I've kind of come to be where I am today in that sense. So that activism has always kind of been there, internally and externally.
So it's that sort of you're finally doing what you've always been doing anyway, kind of thing, of like, I've been building towards this and now I'm doing it. I've put a piece of it together here and a piece of it together there, and now it's all together.
Absolutely.
Here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's funny, because my family would always kind of be, oh, she's always there and with the fights. She's always the one who's pulling people apart. She's always the one who's kind of, she's in there where something is, going wrong, or what doesn't sit right with her. And that's what I used to do. So if there was a boy bullying a girl, I'd be like, come on, you want to start a fight, start with me. Come on then. And it was a running joke, because my dad would be like, who have you had a fight with now? And I'd be like, well, this is what so and so did, and then they did that, and it's not fair. So she couldn't say anything or do anything. So I told him to put on somebody his own size or whatever. My dad's going, oh my God, this girl. So, but I says, why are you doing that? You've always told me to fight for justice, and for truth. And he's like, oh gosh, yes, I have. So yeah.
I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
No. Not literally, anyway. So let's do a bit on Mizan.
Mizan, yeah,
That's what it's called. You're right, Mizan. And the womb health. How did you get into that? So, and what's particular about womb health? And are we talking the full life cycle of a womb, or are we talking sort of like, preparing the room for reproduction, or postnatal, or is it for a particular point? Like, what's all that about, I guess?
So I came about Mizan. Somewhere subconsciously, I'd seen a news article on Mizan. That was around 2016, I believe. But I parked it and I thought, oh, one day I'd like to know more about this. But as with anything, especially for me, I'm like, a sponge for lots of different learning and different things. But I parked it and thought, whenever the time is right, forgotten about it. And it was a really good friend of mine who sought Mizan for her own health. And then I advised a family member of this and said, look, before you go under the knife, check this out, see if it's, if it works. Then when they both came back with the fact that this is the name, and thinking, why does that ring a bell? Then I realised, oh gosh, I remember the news article. This is the lady, the founder. But then in that sort of time, I think it was about 2019, as I'm studying as I'm doing my PG dip in counselling and psychotherapy, we've done some training and we've learnt about, and I'm doing more sort of reading around psychosomatic issues and how, trauma sits in our bodies, etc. So there's an element of that. And as I got to know more and more about Mizan, it's like, this would go hand in hand or could go well with what I'm doing, what I'm studying. However, the professional side of things wasn't the driving force. My daughter went through severe difficulties with her period, to the point where she was fainting. She would keel over. She would be sick. It was awful watching her, and I would try everything I could. And I'd go to the doctors, and I'm not medical, bashing anybody medically here at all. There's a place for medicine, absolutely. But when you just hand over a pill for whether it's depression or whether it's for period issues, you're masking the root cause, and nobody's looking at what the root issues are. Here's a pill, and we've normalized painful periods. It's common, but it's not normal. But we kind of go, here's a tablet. That's the be all and end all. So just coming back a little bit, I then decided that I would train in Mizan. If all else fails, let me see if Mizan works on my own daughter. So with her being really kind of young and naive at the time, I would carry out Mizan. So Mizan is a technique. It's an upper and lower abdominal massage, hands-on massage. And there's certain sort of stretching techniques, and then it's a massage of the back. But that also, what goes hand in hand with that is self-care practices. And those self-care practices include your diet and castor oil pack, steaming. I'm going to add, there's different terms for it: yoni steaming, womb steaming, pelvic steaming. Also, womb or belly binding, so to speak. So there are so many self-care practices that go hand in hand with the massage itself for optimum results. So here we are. I've trained in Mizan, and then I'm wanting to do that with my daughter, who at the time was like, oh, I'm not sure, Mum, I'm really ticklish, I'm so many different things. And I'm kind of like trying to be serious here. Look at the pain you're going through and let me at least try this. And so it was hit and miss. I'm going to be honest with you. It was hit and miss with her at the time. But what she did realize is when she would allow for me to do massage, or when she would, incorporate these self-care practices, she would find that there was a difference in the pain and the symptoms of the periods, but she wasn't consistent. And then we had, then she was off to uni, then we had COVID. So there was a lot of, things that kind of, change within that. However, given about two or 3 years ago, she got married, and she's always wanted to have children, but the difficulty was that her period seemed to go from bad to worse at this point. She ended up at the hospital, and then they diagnosed her with what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. I've got a
Yeah.
little question mark, and I do wonder whether it's endometriosis, but that's, by the by. But there's so much around this. And they literally kind of says it's going to be really difficult for you to conceive, basically. So then she spoke to me and she says, Mum, look, whether I have children or not now, I need to sort my womb out, basically. I can't live like this. This is awful. And treat me like a client. And I was like, that's music to my ears, because I trained for you. So when she spoke to me, we were every week I was carrying out the massage. She got rid of everything that she's not supposed to eat that would perhaps cause inflammation to her body. She was eating the right stuff, the right kind of supplements. And 2 months down the line, I get a call telling me that she's pregnant. And that was, due to her hard work as well, for changing things significantly. But the thing is, her goal was to have better periods. Her goal wasn't to conceive, so it came as a huge shock.
Yeah.
So here we are. I proudly call myself a grandma, because I'm a grandma of two now. We've got two little ones. But from that conversation of it's going to be really difficult for you to conceive, etc., to here we are with two little children is it just I believe in what I do. And so prior to my own daughter having her children, the amount of women that I've helped and supported with the Mizan, those who haven't had a period for years, have ended up kind of, a week later. I think they did a Google review for me and whatnot as well, that they ended up having a period. I've had other women who have been diagnosed with endometriosis, and they're in severe pain, but when they've had the massage and they're doing the self-care as they should, they report that it's not as painful. But also within that, with my psychotherapy and knowing that trauma sits in our body, especially with women, around our hips and our womb, there's something about the release or the movement of that trauma. And also, there's research that's been carried out around intergenerational trauma as well. So sometimes what might be going on for us may not be something that we've experienced directly, but it could be because of intergenerational trauma, and that's passed down into the womb as well. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question there.
No, you have. I'm thinking now about your journey into going into business for yourself. So was it just then you started doing this, you got a few people sort of through word of mouth, or were you doing this as like a paid for professional practice, or did that sort of evolve?
So it was word of mouth. I think I immediately kind of set up a website and decided, right, this is what I want to do, help and support women. I'm still in the middle of training at this point as a psychotherapist, so I'm not qualified, but I can do this at least. And I now realise, that this kind of I'm moving 10 steps forward, but I'll come back to that. But a lot of where I've been in life and the way I work, I think is thanks to my ADHD, which I've discovered now in that sense. So I recognise, no wonder this was going on for me, and that I was, doing this, that, and the other. And I think
why
that's
my CV looks like that.
Yes, literally. Literally. So yeah, I was like, I can't work. I don't really want to work for somebody. I was working at the time. Again, all my jobs have majority of the time have been with within the charity sector. So I had to reduce my hours at some point, and then I'd had the odd few clients who realised that, there's somebody based in Leeds. And again, I'm going to add here, it's interesting because I have a broad range of clients, a diverse range of clients. But what I've noticed was that a lot of Muslim and South Asian women were seeking something of this nature. But equally, I found that clients from different backgrounds or, my white counterparts, they were also seeking something quite holistic as well. So, yeah, it just once I was out there, I was like, I don't really want to work for anybody. I want to work for myself. I don't take two orders in inverted commas, or task. I've got to do things in my own time and whatnot. And then as I was going through the psychotherapy journey, the training, we were advised that we should perhaps work for an organisation or the NHS or something, and then consider opening up a private practice. But my supervisor, she was and is still amazing, and she was like, you don't need to wait around, or you can work for anybody. You can open up your own private practice. So, but right, if I open up my own private practice in counselling in Mizan, can integrate the two. I'm in control of what I do and how I work, which also then aligns with I'm working with what's called, the season. So the seasons we have on the outside, external seasons, we as women have our internal seasons, and we go through the spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So I'm kind of in that sense being true to that and practicing what I preach in that sense as well. So yeah, that's these inner seasons are a whole different topic, but I'm aligning myself with that, and I'm encouraging others to do that as well. The women that come and see me. So yeah, it just from there I reduced my hours, and then I was in full-time practice. 2019 in April is when I was qualified as a Mizan practitioner. By the time it came to October 2019, I think it was, I qualified as a psychotherapist. February 2020, I set up my private practice, and
Great timing.
March 2020, March 2020, everything shuts down.
Okay, well, you've given us the perfect segue there. So take us through the story. What happened? So I would imagine at that point, you didn't even have the clients to have to go and contact and say that you're basically just opening your doors, and the world says, no, go home, close your doors and windows, and you stay in there. So
Like, do you really
how
think
are
I'm
you
going to give you this
how are you
surgery?
still here? What happened?
Do you know what? COVID happened, and whilst it was, and I say this with all respect and love and compassion for all the people that were affected by it, it was an absolute blessing in disguise for me. And I'll say, and I'll tell you why, because it gave me time to stop, because I was that person who, I was doing some volunteering work. I was still, managing my children, managing the home, giving it 100%. It's not as if I wasn't giving it,
And you're about to tell everyone to do self-care, and they're like, when have you ever done that?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I'm constantly studying. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And there was something else. I had my pie, my fingers in so many pies. But I was thriving, or trying to thrive in all of them. And I was constantly sort of running to and fro. My son was doing, he was doing taekwondo, and it was one of those where I'm constantly, there's a running joke. I don't know why I'm living in a house. I might as well live in a camper van. I would, majority of the time, my living space was my car. Come COVID, and it's like, oh, I have a home, I have a house. Oh, it has, how many bedrooms?
Oh, look at these walls. I've not really ever looked at them before.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we are. Like, I was able to kind of stop, and this new way of life, in a sense. But me opening the doors to Mizan and to counselling, it's like, oh, this is interesting. What do I do here? My practice ended up thriving. So even if I couldn't do the physical elements of Mizan,
Mm-hmm.
there was the online stuff that I was doing. I had clients for just psychotherapy and counselling who found me through the directories that I was registered on and with, word of mouth, thanks to other, therapists who knew what I specialised in.
So were you working with just all women at this point? Or are you still specialising in South Asian women? But are you working with all age ranges, or are you sort of mostly pre or postnatal or something like that?
All
Yeah.
women, all women. So basically, the minute a child may hit puberty to menopause, women of, all ranges, different diverse backgrounds. I don't not work with men, but with Mizan, I don't work with
Yeah.
men, as it's very much a,
Womb based.
the womb based, but also it does work for men. There's perhaps a few different techniques, but for me, it's not something that I want to train in. However, what I do is I do I do talk about Mizan, I do talk about womb wellness to men, and I think it's really important
Yeah.
to educate men
Yeah.
on this, basically. So every opportunity I get, I do bring it to that. So
How do they
yeah,
go? Are men quite responsive, or is it they're all like
they are.
trying
They
not to
kind of
pay attention?
they are responsive. I don't think to date I've had somebody who's kind of like, I don't want to know. I'm not interested in this. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just because I think for me, when I've come across the men that I have, whether that's due to events, work based, or events, or in personal professional life, they will either have a daughter, they will either have a wife or a partner, they will either have a mother, they will either have a sister, they will have somebody or a work colleague of some kind of friend that they're fond of. So it gets that kind of, it gets them thinking in that sense. And also, whilst, we may, that there's this ongoing joke, oh, is it that time of month? But also it can feel quite offensive. Actually, well, yeah, it is that time of month. And it doesn't always have to be that time of month. There are things that are happening in women's bodies that you're not aware of. It's not just that time of month. For one woman could be, a regular period. But for somebody else, somebody with endometriosis, somebody with PCOS, somebody with,
It can be
it could,
2 weeks, 3 weeks, or
yeah,
a day,
exactly.
or yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that time of, not just that time of month, but for some women, it's just that time of year. So, yeah, I have found that quite interesting and a good response. And then with women, so there's the two strands. When I'm working with the South Asian or Muslim women, I educate them on how the womb is connected to the throne of God and how important it is in our faith. And then suddenly something connects, because it's, oh, well, we just have periods, or we just bear children. But there's so
Just
much more to that. Just, yeah.
just to incubate a human life for 9 months.
Exactly. But there's so much more to it. And it's like, I'm feeling sort of horrified with this, because I remember sort of my experience of, being pregnant with my children, and my, initially with my daughter. My dad would make me these really, this sort of goodness. It was like a sweet dish, but it had all the nuts and whatnot in. And because he, whilst not educated academically, he's got a lot of knowledge, and, he's got a lot of that information, that sort of holistic kind of care. And he was the one who would be like, well, you're not fasting, and have you had anything warm? Are you on your, are you on your period? Well, there's no need for you to come down and do this. So he was very caring. So that's the experience I had, but not everybody had that experience, especially in the South Asian community and the Muslim community. So trying to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not change, but challenge that narrative in a sense. And for them to unlearn these cultural practices that aren't Islamic practices. was really, really interesting and really kind of empowering for women.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a case of I work with all ranges of women. I don't not work with men, but a lot of women seem to navigate towards me. In terms of men, that with psychotherapy, I've had a few men come through to work with me. But as I said, I think I don't know, somehow naturally, perhaps because of my bio, because of what I do as well. It seems to be women that come to me, whether it's for psychotherapy or whether it's for Mizan. But what's interesting is that there is that diversity of not just in terms of their ethnicities, but also where they're coming from in different parts of the world. I would say not just nationally here in the UK, but women from all over the world who've got in touch and I'm working with.
You're in one of those areas. You're in one of those areas where it's so massive. Like you could hyper specialize, charge a fortune for it, and be really like in demand. Like I don't know how many people are doing Mirzan. I don't know. I've not come across it before. This you're the first person to sort of bring this to my attention. But it seems to me that is just such a massive, massive area for the market, because you've got the whole of, a woman's active reproductive cycle through their life. And for every kind of cause, like you say, and because there's so much variety within it. And there would be so much demand, especially just in the area of women who have difficult menstrual cycles, who, like you say, go to the doctor and the doctor's like, have this, go away.
Yeah, literally. I think the only doctor that I've noticed, and I think there's now a few more,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
the
they're
ones,
not, again, no one's a
no,
monolith. There are a variety of doctors who will be very, very good with this, but also
but
their
who's
capacity.
vocal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the one who's vocal is Dr. Nigger Arif.
Mm,
So, you've now got a few more that are coming through in terms of social media
mm,
and kind of speaking about this. But we're in
I know.
2024. We're in 2024. Women have been around for centuries. And here we are. So there are some doctors who, will kind of, push towards something, but very few, very few. But also there's something, because of we're living in a very, in a social media kind of culture.
Mm,
You need those kind of influencers, or those that are creating the content and speaking about these issues, who are compassionate and who are understanding about, how it affects women. And as says, Dr. Nigger Arif is one of those women who speaks about it. And she caters for like the general wider audience, but also some of her content is in Urdu or Punjabi to, for women from the South Asian community to kind of understand and grasp that, look,
mm,
this isn't normal and there are things that you can do, or how you need to knock on your doctor's door, basically, and not be ignored in that sense. So, yeah, it's it is something that, I think there's probably about 200 of us Mizan practitioners. Perhaps there may be other womb wellness practitioners,
mm,
or people who do work with the body and the womb. But I think it's only now that, people are kind of looking for something more holistic.
mm,
And then they're discovering that there's something called Mizan, or
mm,
there's other sort of, modalities in terms of working with the body. So yeah, I think there is something about, I don't know now, but I think at least a year or two ago, I was one of the only kind of person who integrated both psychotherapy and Mizan.
mhm,
Not all Mizan therapists are counsellors, and not all the counsellors have done Mizan
mhm,
training. So that's something I've specialised in. But in terms of that, whilst I could, I charge what I charge because, I value myself and the training. However, I also, I also cater for those that, have barriers in terms of the economical means and perhaps transport means, etc. So there is something where they have that conversation with me and I kind of gauge where they're at. I will, I will work with them in the best way possible, where they, where they will gain something from my services, but it won't cost them. And what feels to them might feel to them an arm and a leg. There was something I promised myself, was because of my own experiences and the difficulties I've had in life and the opportunities that I've been given. It's almost that paying it back and paying it forwards into the community. But whilst I also still have to make a livelihood, so there's a bit of a balance there.
I can't remember who. I mean, it's probably more than one guest that I've had the conversation with, but you know, it's working in that area where it's like I say, you could make a lot of money out of this. Like, you could really specialize in very rich women, and but it's also there's a mission aspect to it where you want to help as many people as possible, and you don't want the money to be a barrier to that. But then you have the real problem of, but that's my energy and time and work, and I have to get money somewhere. I have to get remuneration somehow, somewhere. I can't just do all this for free all the time. So finding that balance. But I mean, again, I guess it fits nicely as an Islamic business, because you have to, like, the way I understand it is, like, part of your faith is that you have to give to the poor as part of your practice and part of your work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is right. There's something about, there's two elements. There will be more, but just to keep it kind of like simple, sort of simplify it. There's two elements to that. One is, depending on what your earnings are, you give 2.5% of your earnings to the poor. The other element is, if you don't have that kind of means and you're just about managing yourself, then there are other ways in which you can give, be charitable, so to speak. And giving is something that, it is fulfilling, it's rewarding. Again, as a society, we've become so individualistic, but, we're a community. We're supposed to be together. We're supposed to look after one another.
An individual can't exist without the rest of us.
Exactly.
Like, even if I mean, you can sort of Robinson Crusoe it, but we all know from COVID of, like, how long before you absolutely lose your mind on your own.
Exactly. Like, so we do need people. We need support. And it's interesting because whilst we have this practice in Islam, and if you look at, like, the NHS guidelines, the 5 ways of well-being, one of which is to volunteer. Now, it's not too dissimilar to us in our Islamic practice. So, giving something, doing something, whether it's your time, whether you've made some food and you're kind of giving it to somebody who's, who's having difficulty or who's homeless. So all these practices are really, really important in terms of our giving. It's, part of our Islamic faith. But yeah, there's something about, there was a time what I read up, I read a book at some point, and don't quote me on it, but when I was looking at the history of Islam, there was a time during I think it was either the Prophet's era or just after Prophet Muhammad, because of this concept of giving a certain amount, no person in that community was left poor. They would actually seek out and kind of go, is there anybody we need to give this money to? We need to give this, proportion to. But because of that nature of giving, and also what's stipulated Islamically of 2.5%, there was nobody who remained poor. So then they would go out and, kind of seek somebody who's poor, because it was like, no, we need to give this. They could have kept it, but they didn't, because for them, that, that part of the faith was really, really important. And so they had to give it somewhere, and that's what they would do. And I think when I look at our society now as well, and I think, gosh, if only there was something that might have been stipulated in terms of where would we have that many homeless people? Would we have that many people who are going to the food bank? Would we, I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of delusional at this point, but it just does make you kind of think about society and where we're at right now.
Yeah, and how society prioritizes what it prioritizes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the COVID question. That got a little bit derailed, but I mean, it did really well fit. Sort of. So let me ask you this then. So coming out of COVID, and this is it's a hard thing because it's like you can't put a date on it, and especially not in the same way you can with the first lockdown.
Yeah.
But were you mainly just delivering lectures and talks and stuff online, or like when was it before you could actually go and meet a client face to face? Or is that non-essential? Is it more like coaching and guidance and sort of teaching people techniques for them to do themselves? Or is it more, because I can imagine as well that another person being there and doing it is a large part of it, because it's that connection, being connected to the social whole thing that we totally underestimate of like how important it is. So I imagine it's very based on you being present and working with the person and tailoring it for the
Absolutely.
person. Is that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think in between with COVID, I mean, there was the initial sort of lockdown. I was then also actually offered a job, a lecturing role online
Mm-hmm.
for level 3 and level 4 students. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a little bit of that was going on in terms of sort of most of my Mizan clients. I think there was a bit of a gap where we could work with people face to face, but
Mm-hmm.
with all the kind of, the mask, the, cleaning of the, room, etc., disinfecting. So there was that point in which, I said to my clients that initially did like the online consultation with me, and I told them self-care. And I says, as soon as we can, I'll get you in. So that did happen. But what that allowed for me was they can put into practice what they need to in order to optimize their Mizan or womb wellness journey, and then they would get the massage. Whereas when I first started, sort of 2019, it was like 3 or 4 hours of the consultation, the massage. So it got me thinking, oh, well, actually, I can offer it in 2 ways. I've got clients that come face to face, or I can offer this aspect of it, time limited. This is the online consultation, then you come in for a massage. So it opened up my way of, oh, right, okay, I can practice it in this way. So yeah, a majority of it was online until we had the gap in between where we could see clients, etc. So now off the back of that, I think it was just 3 years ago. So just after everything kind of settled with COVID, I then decided that I had this dream of 10 years, but I was too kind of, no, I don't think I can. I ended up facilitating and organising a women's only retreat, and especially geared at Muslim women, and the whole sort of thing around Mizan, womb wellness, mental health, spiritual health. And that's what, that's what I've been doing for the last few years as well. So I'm kind of doing pockets of different things, but with that same level of energy and love and compassion, and giving it my all. Yeah, I think have I answered the question there?
Yeah. So, and now I'm thinking, so is it still just you? Like, is the business still just you? Have you taken anyone else on yet?
I would ideally like to take others on.
Yeah.
My mission, my goal for future, I'm putting this out there, and I keep praying for it, is ideally I would like to be able to have my own centre of some kind where, whether it's like a community interest or a social enterprise, but something charitable as well. So you've got people that are coming in who can access the mental health, the womb wellness stuff, but also then you've got the higher end paying clients, and to be able to do that. But yes, I am a one woman band at the moment. I've got people who want to collaborate with me, and I've done some collaborative work as well. But majority of the work is me individually doing this and managing the different aspects of my businesses and bringing them in together as well. But again, it's that thing of that there's personal sort of history, as I mentioned earlier, with my ex who left me and my children to kind of, house is almost going to get repossessed. So I've been trying to catch up financially.
Yeah.
So that's had an
Yeah.
impact, and but yeah, ideally, I've got this vision, and I hope I can, bring it into fruition in that sense.
Yeah. Because I would say to anyone who's got the cash and interested, it's like this is an area for potentially massive growth, and Okay, so we won't do that yet. Let's do Brexit, because hopefully this should be short. I don't know, but like maybe it's a huge issue. Has Brexit affected your work in any way? Has it changed anything for you at all?
So Brexit, I don't think it necessarily has changed anything for me. The only thing I would perhaps say is that in terms of Brexit, because of the kind of specialism with the South Asian Muslim women, the work that I'm doing or trying to do is more geared towards places like perhaps Morocco or Pakistan, etc. So I'm kind of like so with Brexit, the only thing I would perhaps say is in terms of trying to send out any of the kind of resources, it's a heavy price.
Anything that's physical that you have to send.
Generally, not necessarily. Having said that, I'm just trying to think. I've not, even with my retreats, I've held them within sort of West Yorkshire. My next one is going to be in Malta, Gozo. So that's happening in May. But yeah, I don't think if I'm really kind of like thinking about it, no, actually, I don't think Brexit has really impacted my work.
So I think these other two areas might be quite big. So I want to start us with climate change. So, and I won't preload this with anything because I want to get your answer first. So in terms of changing climate, is that something that appears in your work? Does it affect your work at all? Is that something that you've kind of thought about in putting the business together?
Yeah, so it does. I would say there's elements of the psychotherapy, but if I'm really honing in on like the Mizan work, yes, it does impact the work that I do, and for my clients as well, and for myself as an individual. The food we eat, for example. So as I mentioned already, in terms of the diet, it's not about going on some kind of diet to lose weight, as we see diet. It's about what's got the added hormones, what's got xenoestrogens in. What are you using? What are you eating? So I will advise that look for organic, don't use plastic. There are all these things that I will share with my clients. So there's that sort of minimum impact in terms of, what they're kind of consuming and what they're putting on their bodies. Things like, what are they using in terms of household
chemicals, cleaners?
Yeah, exactly. So all of this is does impact the work that I do in that sense. The water as well. Whilst you've got tap water that's contaminated with lots of stuff, you've got you want to go for your spring waters, and that's in plastic bottles. So it almost sort of defeats the purpose. But again, what I will add is here we are with an economical crisis where things like organic food and the good stuff is expensive. And as I already mentioned, you've got those people that are going to the food banks, for example. If I've got a client who is coming from a particular background, and I know that that they're using perhaps the food bank, or this is where they're at, but they need help and support from me in terms of what they're going through, then I'll work with them on that. But I'll kind of give that sort of advice and guidance that ideally you might want to be having this, but I can understand at the moment, have what you can, do what you can, minimize what you can, where you can. Whereas if it's somebody that I know that, actually they would be able to afford to do this, I'll be a bit more, look, please try and follow this to a T. So there's perhaps a difference in how I'm working with my clients because of what their economical and financial background might be. But yeah, there's, I think in terms of working with my clients, or the impact climate change has is with what they eat and drink and what they're using, basically.
And and it's the whole, not to get too Gaia about it all, but it's being tied into a closed biological system, into a biome of like what happens in here affects what's going on with us, with collectively and individually, and extreme variations in weather temperature, changes in precipitation, like all of these things. I mean, there's that tendency to kind of think of it as being a bit woo-woo or whatever, but it's also
It's
like, no,
connected.
everything's connected. There is a physical consequence. The things happen consequentially and react to other things and run on from other things and hit other things, and we don't
Absolutely.
always count all the variables, all of these kind of things. But it is tied into these changes of like, to what degree we don't know. But I mean, as far as when people talk about something like the mental health crisis, that could be as much to do with just like it's hotter now, so our brains have changed, so now we're like this now.
Yeah,
Like, it probably isn't, but you know what I mean. Like, it could be any number of these things that we don't even know yet. Like, we're not even at the beginning of unraveling or understanding.
absolutely. And I think there's something about, if we look at the levels of pollution as well, people with
Yeah.
respiratory issues, let alone, what COVID brought up, etc., what that was about and where we're still at.
And what it's left us with as well, and the reinfections and
Yeah,
long COVID,
yeah.
like, which is severely under talked about, underreported. It's happening. They're looking at it, but at the same time, it feels like we're not allowed to say this is a thing, because if we do, we'll have to pay loads of people lots of money.
Precisely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And there is something about, in terms of with this very kind of temperamental, weather. It has, if research is saying that we go through something called SAD, seasonal affective disorder. Okay, and that's the winter period. Now, where we don't really have the winters and summers and springs, like from what I can remember anyway.
Yeah. We've got the darkness. It's the dark period of
This
the
is
year, but it's not necessarily, it has been cold,
yes,
but it's also been 15, 16
yeah,
degrees.
yeah, absolutely. And then you come and people are looking forward to the months of June, July, and August, and then again,
It just pees down.
what's happened there? So when you spoke about that sort of affecting mental health, well, there is an element of that.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
I've spoken to so many people, and this includes myself. I speak to myself, but that's part and parcel of who I am as a person. Um, but there's something about part of me. It's like, oh, I don't want to be in this country with this weather. I want to be somewhere a little bit warmer, where I know that there are seasons. But
Yeah,
even
where you will see the sun occasionally and like
yeah,
see some blue
that
sky.
heat, that nice
There's only
heat.
so much grey I can take.
Exactly. And every other person I'm speaking is kind of like going, yeah, this is a bit crap, really. So I do wonder, in terms of that, where we've got something called SAD, but then what is that throughout the year when we only have pockets of sun? And that is climate change, isn't it? It's impacting, us mentally, it's impacting us physically. And as you said earlier about with COVID and long COVID, for example, there's something about that. It's very sort of implicit. There's, but we can't talk about it, or we won't say that this is happening.
Yeah.
Give people a break, will you? Because people have been struggling. Some people want to do is make sense of what's going on for them. And that's the bottom line. Be honest. This is what's happened. This is what we thought was best. This is what's gone on. This is how it's impacted you. Sometimes it's just that honesty that you kind of want.
Which is really, really hard to find now because
Yes.
of the next thing. So we'll go on to social media.
Yeah.
So I want to look at here how much you have to kind of do for your work. I would imagine that word of mouth kind of does a lot of this for you.
Mm-hmm.
But It's that whole thing of more and more of us, even if we're not directly in a kind of marketing, social media thing, more of us are expected to do it. Even if you're working in a bar or whatever, like I bet there are people in banks now who are dreading like one of the social media marketers coming around and being like, "Hey, do you want to be fun online today for the thing?"
Oh,
So,
yeah.
um, but also, if you're doing it right, it can reap tremendous results for you and so on. I mean, you could very much have gone down the influencer line with this if you didn't want to see people and you kind of, I'm a bit agoraphobic from my years of caring. I
Yeah.
just want to, but I've learned this and I want to spread it. Again, that's an area you could have been in. Um, yeah. So for you, how's the social media? Do you do any of it? Do you like it? Do you get it? Or
Mm.
is it just like, oh God, do I have to do this?
So it's a bit of everything. It's
Yeah.
again, maybe, part and parcel with the way my brain works. So I know I could do better. I know there are certain things I could do and really be that sort of, influencer content creator, as well
Mm,
as, physically doing the job that I do as well. But my passion is that I want, if not every woman, every other woman to know that there is an alternative, or there is this kind of modality out there, or, reaching out to the youngest of, like I says, once they hit puberty, once the girls have had, are having their first period, to, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter whether you have a uterus, womb inside of you, or whether you've had a hysterectomy, because there is that, what I would say is the energetic space is there, the spiritual space is still there. So with social media, I go through phases of, oh yeah, I must put something out there, and I can spend a whole weekend on doing 3 posts, posting them out, and do you know what? I've then had enough. I am exhausted from it.
mm.
In terms of doing more, I try to be consistent, and then I drop off somewhere. So I think there's something about,
Do you put a lot of time into the post? Do you sort of make the post and you intend it to be a quick, I'm just going to put this out there, and then you end up spending
yeah,
ages? Yeah.
it is, and it's
Then you're like, you're not happy with it anyway.
yeah. So I put it out there because I need to put something out there and say hello, I'm here.
Yeah,
Um,
you should have just gone. You should have just posted that.
you
Yeah.
know, that's it. But there is something about, that information. I think I was doing really well at one point with, oh, and here's a cup of hot lemon and water and honey that I'm having this morning, and do you what?
Hello, ladies. Here's your tip for today: womb health.
Well, that's literally what it's called. It was like, womb care, womb wellness tip or something. So I did that. Uh,
It's Women's Womb Week this week.
and, and there I am trying to pose with my feet, with my fluffy socks on. Like, how do I get this right without it looking like I'm doing, something else? And a picture of your socks and your feet. I'm like, what am I doing here? But again, with that sort of educational kind of thing of, did you know that, you should keep your feet warm because it affects your uterus, etc. So there is something education, but my gosh, trying to kind of create these kind of pictures and it is a whole job, isn't it? So there's parts of me when I'm able to, financially able to, I want to be able to invest in somebody who might be able to do a little bit of media
Mm,
marketing and get the hang of it. But I'd say I'm not doing too bad. However, having said that, I've had other people that I've done that collaborative work with, and
mm,
they are perhaps content creators, or they've got that huge following, and because
mm.
of them, I've ended up with a following, and I'm always being credited as other people. So
Yeah.
that's helped in terms of working with others, and that collaborative work has helped kind of build my sort of profile or presence on social
Yeah.
media in that sense.
I think that seems like a really good way to go because it's kind of like you have inherent clout. You have inherent social media clout in the area that you're working in. So it seems sensible to just let people kind of boost off you and you boost off them. So it's like they do the post for you
Yeah.
and you're there and they get the kudos of you being there doing what you do
Yeah. Yeah.
and you get the kudos of their their post.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a really nice way to work it.
Definitely. I think there's something about, I can shout out about how good this is or how good I am or what I do, but I'm
Speaks louder if someone else is doing it.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's also just
And
not
it's about
me.
people working with you. Like,
Yes.
so there isn't, I know exactly what I'm trying to say here, but it's that whole thing of it's your social proof, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
Of like, because if you were just posting about, I'm all about this, people will be like, yeah, you're all about posting about that
Yeah.
rather than you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
And the audience that you're looking to interact with, to attract, to hit, is very much more like, yeah, but what are you really?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's more,
How good are you really? Well,
yeah,
you're going to promote yourself.
yeah, and it's collegiate recommendations, isn't it? It's like
Yes.
you will trust this person when someone you trust in real life has gone, I've worked with them and they're good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's this kind of, almost like how with how we have references on our CVs, or
Mm,
that they are sort of references, aren't they? In that
mm.
sense, in social media,
Yeah, your
the
testimonials. Yeah.
testimonials.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So yeah, it's social media is an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah. And it's I mean the other thing as well is that very much, especially when you started a business and if you're reading the marketing stuff of like, I've got to do some of my own marketing and all of that, it's that surface level just rubbish that they're telling you, and it's all about clicks and likes and shares and stuff, and it's like that is none of the value in social media is in that. I mean, it is to a degree, but it's the who. It's not the how many. Again, it's the who. It's the quality, not quantity. Quantity has its own power and
Yeah,
can bring quality, but it's who are you hitting? I'm only reaching 10 people, but if those 10 people, depending on what you're selling, but are your biggest market and biggest buyers, you're hitting exactly the right people.
yeah, and I think that's really important, isn't it? Because for me, it's like that drop in the ocean. For me, even if I reach one person, or
Hmm.
and again, it's that passing on of that knowledge of so many clients that have come to me. They've then spoken about how they've recommended this to somebody else and somebody else, and also, even if they're not going to come to me for treatment, they're sharing some of that knowledge and whatnot. So they're still it's kind of out there in a way. Yes, ideally, you kind of on a business, that kind of level, you want clients coming in, but on the other side of things, with what I'm passionate about is women knowing that about that sort of woman empowerment in that sense.
Well, you also want them to be satisfied, to be happy,
Definitely.
because it's not just, you don't just want to bring people through the door.
No, no.
You want them to come back
Indeed.
till they're at a point, I guess, where maybe if you're teaching them something that they can then go away and do
Yeah.
themselves, then your mission is to get through as many people as possible to do that. And if it's more of a long-term thing, then your mission is to build the best client base you could build and do the best you can with those individual clients.
I think so. So it's interesting because I was thinking, I'm laughing to myself that I really don't think as a business, because when I have some clients coming and those that are paying clients who can
Hmm.
pay and afford to, I'll be like, look, the care and guidance, you might come to me for the massage, and that's brilliant. That will help and support you. But this element, my prices, indicate that this self-care is really important for you to do,
Yeah.
because if they're missing an element and they're kind of going, this didn't quite work, I'm not sure. And then I ask, well, did you do this? Have you done this as advised, and, as prescribed? Oh, no, I didn't get a chance to. I'm like, and I often say, well, it's great. You're giving me the money and that's going into, into my sort of pot. But then are you really investing in yourself?
Hmm.
And that's my key thing is, if you're paying this amount of money, are you truly investing in yourself?
Yeah. Well, it's also the general understanding of how we're paying for things and what we're paying for, I think, is not particularly smart.
Yes.
It's the best way I can think to
Yeah,
phrase it this time on a Tuesday.
yeah.
But it's that whole thing of like, sell a thing. To do something, you must produce, and then you produce and you sell a thing, and you sell the thing to as many people as possible. But it's also, then you get that kind of more savvy level of don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle. So
Yeah.
you're selling the idea, not the thing. But with the care and with complementary services, and the whole point of alternative holistic medicines, all of that kind of area, is one of the major things that it provides that the health service can't necessarily, because they don't have the capacity and efficiencies and all of these kind of reasons that we hear. Is the space, is someone listening to you, and that is such a huge, why is therapy so big and so important? It's somebody listening to, like, actually listening to you, not to what they expect to hear from you or what they want you to do or want you to say, to what you have to say. And that is very rare, right? Even in people's relationships, partnerships, like in their, people have it. There are people who have those spaces and relationships, but not everyone does. And most of us don't.
Yeah.
And that's a really valuable part of the service. And I can see why you sort of, and especially in those instances where someone is kind of, I've given you all the instructions, I've given you how you to do everything. I know why you're not doing it. And that's why I provide this space for us to unpack that and go, right, well, how can we create the space for you so you can start doing these practices in your life? Where can we fit in? Where can we, get a wedge and start opening up that space?
Absolutely.
That was it. That was a nice visual metaphor at the end, I thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really kind of articulated that, better than I could have. That it is that, isn't it? And just as you were talking there, my brain was kind of going, it'd be great to be able to, ideally, if I had the time and capacity, I'd check in with them every so often on a regular basis, because I think there's something about, for some people that I've come across, there's that, that accountability, or I just need that reminder, or that, and I do wonder whether, I think, could it be that within my service, could I create an app that they can, access, and therefore that, they're putting what they need to in. There's that accountability, and so there are different things that are coming into head, but it's that into my mind. But it is about, are you truly investing in you? And if I have clients who are coming for a fertility protocol, they've gone through IVF, and it's like, well, you follow that to a T, don't you?
Yeah.
So why would this be any different? I don't charge thousands of pounds, but if you did everything to a T and you've gone through that process, then you know what? You'll see the results of that. So yeah.
But if you did charge thousands of pounds, they would do it. It's that weird thing, isn't it? Like
People are already
value.
saying I'm expensive.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you started doing all of this for free, nobody would call you. Like, people would be like, "Oh, well, she's not charging. It can't work."
But look, even a couple of hundred people are like, yeah, they think I'm expensive, and it's like, oh, really?
No, this is an individualized, personalized service where you speaking to someone who's gone through training, spent lots of money, has years of work experience. Like, we undervalue people. Well, certain people don't get undervalued, but it's that whole thing of my time, my knowledge, my experience, and also my bills and my landlord and my and my tax collector.
Everything, but they don't see that, and I think that saddens me a little bit, because, like, you see, like, some people will say that they're going on holiday, they're doing this, and then, have you got a discount? Like, what? Yeah, no, I haven't. So I do also choose. I'm not going to sort of sit here as if, but I do choose clients I will work with as well. As much as it's about clients working with me or the service, I'm also very kind of, maybe I'm somewhat picky with who I will work with as well. Because
But there's got to be a match.
yeah,
There's got to be a
yeah,
match because it is because they are working with you. And like I said, that space and the therapy and the counseling, like you've got to not quite perfectly align or anything, but you've got to be on a similar wavelength, because otherwise it's just not going to
no,
work.
no, absolutely. But I have seen where, spoken to like certain peers and colleagues who maybe not be necessarily in the Mizan field, but in other fields as well. And they will take anyone and everyone on because of the financial needs and whatnot. And for me, it's like, do you know what? Whatever the finances, got to look after me. I'm doing what I can, but I will not, try and align myself with somebody who doesn't align with the values of what I'm offering in that sense. And, and that's it basically. But I know others who will still work with people and they're like, oh, that client came again and it was, and I'm like,
Yeah, what are you doing?
just,
Get rid of them, bin them. Like, why?
why are you,
You're in charge. Why are you making your life
yeah,
difficult like this?
yeah.
There are other services they
Yeah,
can
they
go
can
to.
access, and that's it. And I do that. Like, I've had people, can I have a discount for this? And it's like this immediate, like, entitlement. It's like, well, look, there's the NHS, you can go to your GP for this referral and that, or you can have a look, on this website and look for another practitioner, but this is what.
Do you have any discounts on your price list?
So the only sort of discount that is apparent is if people book in for the packages of 3 or 6,
Yeah.
etc. So
That's what I was going to say. It
there's a
was like, yeah,
discount
you
there,
can have a discount if you
and
buy this.
and a
Yeah.
gift that I offer them
Yeah.
to start off.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is, but
Yes, exactly. So the answer is yes,
yes,
but you have to spend more.
yes. I do have, I do, this, as much as I'm passionate, I think there's also this entire, well, if you're in the helping field, if you're in the, well, no,
Oh yeah,
I've got to
you
help
should.
myself first. I've got to pay my
Yeah,
bills.
yeah. You should die for all of us. You should give us all of your life energy and force and knowledge,
And
and
that's
we'll
it.
feast off that. And you just whatever. We don't care.
Exactly. And the thing is, nobody actually knows my personal circumstances. So, and then it's like, I know them. So I'm valuing where I'm at, who I am, the what I've invested in order to in order to do what I'm doing. And I've often said, if it wasn't that I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and I believe that this is my calling, I could easily pack this in, and I could quite easy. It sounds really arrogant of me, but I could quite easily go into the corporate world again.
Yeah.
I was really good at with banking. I was really good
Oh
at
my God!
so I can do that, but I don't want to do
You
that.
could massively build a career out of corporate training and stuff, and
Mhm.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here I am.
Yeah. Okay, so we're into final 2 questions territory. I might even be on time. I can't let us overrun too much because I've got another recording this
Oh,
afternoon.
bless me.
So I ummed and ahed about which way around I'm going to do it, but I'm going to stick to the traditional route. So if you could change any 3 things about your work, and bearing in mind you're self-employed, so you can change a lot of things, but you can be fantastical about this, so you can change the world if you want. But if you could change any 3 things about your work, what would you change?
That was the most kind of like interesting question. Not that the others weren't, but that was the one that I kind of went, oh yeah, I can, and I thought I can really run with this. I think I spoke about having a centre or some kind of retreat centre in that sense, where I've got what I have mapped out in there, where you've got the people that are paying for that, and then I've got fundraising that happens in order to kind of like sustain and maintain that, but also you've got people who can't, who haven't got the means, but there's no barriers to them, using this space. So I think ideally, maybe perhaps like a sort of a charitable kind of centre, but it is being paid for in that sense. The other thing that I would change about my work, I say change, but have perhaps, is a scanner of some kind of X-ray, some kind of, where when I'm doing my Mizan work, or even like, with mental health and stuff, where, you've got this kind of brain scanning equipment, you've got the scanners that, can show me that, yes, you have, this is how your endometrial lining looks like. This is, you've got cysts here, and that there's a quicker sort of process in terms of that. And being self-employed, I think I would have a team of people. I would have a team of people who I would ideally pay really well. Like, I think there's something about that.
So who would be your first hire? Have you thought about like first hire? Who would you go for first? Would it be like a PA, a marketer? Would it be like tax bod business head? Who would be, or would it be someone that you train up doing the same thing, and so you could kind of double your capacity? Like, who would you go for?
Oh, first one. I'm torn between whether somebody with that business head who would kind of help me, really
do all the admin, the planning, strategy,
maybe that,
right?
Maybe that's who I would hire. On the other side of things, just thinking where I'm at right now is to have that sort of somebody who's just doing that basic admin and doing all of that, where I can then do the work that needs
you
to be
can
done.
focus on the
one or the other out of them two, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard call, because, and a lot of the time they kind of like get someone to do the stuff you don't want to do.
Yeah. I love doing hands-on stuff, you see. So for me, that the work that I'm doing, that hands-on kind of like sitting in that room, either doing that massage or talking to.
It's relevant. It's important. It's meaningful. Bits of paper aren't.
Yeah.
They're like,
absolutely.
And what's this here for?
And ideally, I'd like somebody to take that off my shoulders. But yeah, if I'm thinking big about having this sort of space in the center, it would be very different to other sort of centres in terms of how I've mapped it out. But I would then have perhaps somebody with that business head who can kind of go, right, these things you need, this is how we're going to go about doing this. And that would be my sort of focus.
How's the business? Are you a CIC, or are you
sole trader? So I have, so for the past 2 years, I have been looking into how I go about becoming like, CIC or some kind of charity organization with what I want to, how I want to kind of like step forward now as well in terms of what I do. So that there is something about that, but finding the right people and where, I can get that advice and guidance, to be able to do this on a larger scale, I guess.
I mean, any of these questions we can always cut out or whatever if I'm,
no,
and feel free to not answer as well. But so what about kind of mentors or networking? Are you sort of, have you done much in that area yet?
So I've recently been accepted on what's called the She Inspires, I think.
She Can Shine?
She Can Shine, yes. So that's just been recent. So it's funny because I think it was just yesterday I'd reached out to one of these sort of founders of that, and we're looking at perhaps having a meeting in the new year. And so and then they've got some events coming up, so that kind of networking and just kind of having a feel and getting to know other people who perhaps might be able to help and support, and where I can help and support them as well, in that sense. But so there is an element of that, and I have I've been getting in touch with other organisations where I'm doing some some of it is paid work or a paid sort of presentation. Some of it is just that, half an hour, 1 hour sort of talking and presenting and, what I do and what I want to do and how I move forwards with that. So there is an element of I'm trying to get myself out there that little bit more. But also I think I need that sort of perhaps more of a more professional help in that sense, or specialist sort of help and support.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move us on to the last question, the UBI question. So if there was a universal basic income, do you think that would have changed your work at all? I mean, I immediately think that during that period in your life, going through a marriage breakup and so on would have been invaluable to you. But yeah, like how would a UBI potentially change things for you?
I think maybe back then, but potentially maybe it would have been quite helpful.
Not especially now,
But
because
maybe not now. And even then, if I'm honest with you, with this question, I am thinking to the sort of Islamic principle of that sort of 2.5% of if everybody did that. Let's not say it's an Islamic kind of conditioning, but if we were able to adapt that in some kind of way, where depending on what people's means are and how much they can. I think that kind of pot would help. I know we've got like this with the taxes, but where does that all go realistically? I think there should.
I mean, I think it goes to bailing out banks and paying for bombs, because it doesn't really
Well,
seem to do anything else, does it?
exactly. So if we had that pot where this is solely for people, where they need that kind of help and support, because even like when you're going through the process of, the benefits process. Oh my God, don't get me. I'm going to get myself started on this.
I mean, even the term benefits
Yeah,
is just so Orwellian at this point.
yeah, exactly.
What benefit am I getting here while I'm being humiliated and
Yes,
impoverished?
yes, exactly. So there's so much in terms of that. And I do wonder if we had something like, that sort of everybody or certain people with certain means put in that 2.5%. And this is solely for individuals, so that they're not going to food banks. They're not on this benefit system. They're being supported out. I wonder if that would be something that would be really, really sort of helpful in today's day and age in society. And as it says, that there's a lot to be said for where our taxes are going, and the NHS is on its knees. We're supporting everywhere else, then we're complaining about asylum seekers and refugees, and you've created monsters. You've created
And created nonsense.
yeah, absolutely.
Like, I mean, how did we get to a point where we live in a world where countries export as much butter as they import and things
Yeah.
like that? It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And even like, I mean, I know we're coming to an end, but even with most recent events, whether we're looking at climate change, whether we're looking at, what we're doing with taxes and things like that, but what the milk we're consuming and or the other goods with Bovaer, it's like, what is actually going on with the world and, the society that we're living in? Is there anything kind of like organically left anymore?
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing sacred. Everything is profane now. Like
Yeah,
everything is
yeah,
spoiled kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah, it is chaos. Then we seem to be stuck in a position where the only thing that can happen is a bunch of outrage and not really any action.
Oh, absolutely. What I will sort of end on for myself is that I think I have I have dreams, I have goals, and I think want to change the world, but I come back to, the circle of control, and it's okay right now. What is it that I can do and help to
Yeah.
influence or change? And that's just, it might be a drop in the ocean, but that's okay for now.
Yeah.
And in terms of using spaces like this with yourself and talking about it, or, other individuals and kind of like having those conversations, they may not have this major impact, but that's, it is going to be impactful in some way or form. And I think
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to, just that circle of control. What is it I can do and what can I contribute to?
Yeah. Well, and it's also more meaningful, the interpersonal, like, and the one-to-one and because it resonates more than something that happens to us at, however many levels of abstraction that we're not really connected to, and we're just kind of either hurt by
Yeah.
or in a few cases benefit from.
Yes.
So this is the point where I throw it over to you. If there's anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about or that you want to raise or promote, if not, don't worry about it. You don't have to. So I'll start off with where can people find you? So if you've got your socials to hand, where can people find you and find out more?
So there's my website, which is the Mizan website, nurturingheartandroom.com, and on Instagram, Nurturing Heart and Room as well. And if anybody wanted to get sort of in touch with me directly, it's Tayba at nurturingheartandroom.com or Tayba at b-cat.co.uk. That's where, they'll be able to find me.
Brilliant. And they will be in the show notes as well. Is there anything else that you want to say, or do you want to get away on time?
No, I've got a client for 12:30, but it's okay. I think I've really enjoyed this. It's really kind of given me, things to kind of like think about. And as we were speaking, that's how my head works. Suddenly, there's something else that's coming up, and I think it's been really interesting. I feel like I've got what I perhaps wanted to say and more out there.
Good.
And I just appreciate your style of presenting or questioning and hosting in that sense. So I appreciate that.
I mean, I want to kind of pick people's brains, but I also want them to have the space to kind of just run on. So yeah, and you can make this as professional as or personal as you want, and depending on your brand, that might be a different way to go. But yeah, if someone wants to come on here and just rant for 2 hours and be like, do you know what? Don't publish that. That's fine. So long as it's not everybody. But also if you want to kind of get your pitch together and sort of, right, how do I want to approach this, and sort of think about your marketing in a different way, equally, yeah, I'm happy to listen, because I want the little anecdotes, and I want the experience, and I want the, how is it for you? What is it like in that sector, and what are the people like in that sector, and why are people doing what they're doing in that area? And yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
No, absolutely. Sort of, I know there's lots of, place I could go with it, and that's on the surface level of, a lot of where I am and what I'm doing. And I think there is something about having this space, and it's interesting that it's come at a timely time, because since I think the end of last year, early this year, I was thinking, I want to dabble in podcasting. I want to dabble in kind of like maybe doing something like that instead of, videos or pictures, and just having, so this has been a really, really kind of positive and good experience, that it's like, okay, maybe this is the way forward in terms of what I've got so much to say. I've got so much to kind of like, not say in terms of, just that kind of person, kind of, I want to have a rant, but in terms of getting people thinking, and, and also helping and supporting them through that sort of, through podcast and through them sort of listening maybe. So yeah, really appreciate the space that you've created.
I think that's a good idea, and I think there's it's a good area for growth. It's a really good way for you to, like, part of the thing that I said when I started this was you should listen to yourself, kind of thing, because we don't. Because most of us are kind of like, I don't want to hear the sound of my own voice. Well, after hearing the sound of my own voice a lot, and not, still not being particularly happy with it, but it is educational. You do learn stuff, about yourself and the way that you present and the way that you try to communicate. But yeah, it's a really good space to practice. It's a good place to sort of try things out and maybe fail without being too sort of public. And yeah, I think you'll find, because I thought I have so much to say, and then you get a microphone and then you say, you're done after about half an hour. Well, oh, is that it? Is that all I've got, actually? It isn't. There is loads more to say, but you can't quite get everything that you want out straight away. Yeah. But yeah, I recommend it. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a dabble, because I think I've already, it's the way just my brain is working. I've already got these segments in my head of how I would kind of do that, and not everything all at once. And like he says, it might be a case of sit there and then suddenly, yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say. But I think there's something about, some kind of structure with it, perhaps. I don't know. I'm kind of.
Most people fail at 10 or before 10. So plan 10, make those 10, and then you've beaten the majority of people.
Yeah.
You'll probably think an hour's a long time, considering that most of mine end up being 2 hours. Yeah, it's a long time for editing and stuff. But doing your 25 minutes is hard, and you need to edit for 25 minutes because you need to keep it down to the good stuff.
Yeah.
So they have a tendency to kind of stretch. So you might be like, right, I'm going to do a nice short podcast. you talk to your guest for 2 hours because it's really interesting. And then you're like, oh, how do I make 20 minutes out of this?
Yeah. Okay.
Don't make 2 hours out of it or whatever. But yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
There will be slippage, but an hour's fine. But then an hour can be quite overwhelming to fill. So, and the beauty of podcasts is they don't have to be a set amount of time every time.
Yeah.
Just so long as if the topic's interesting enough and people trust you and that you're going to be investigating that to a level that they want, they'll listen.
Right. Yeah.
And you've got an email list already, so you've kind of got a captive audience there to begin with. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you. That's some good sort of pointers there, I think, to kind of think about and
kick you off.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
You know what? Thank you. I'm going to press stop there before I do my wrap up. Thank you again to Tayba for being my guest. Thanks, as always, to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. You can follow Tayba at nurturingheartandwomb.com or follow her on Instagram at nurturingheartandwomb. Keep me alive and keep this show going by sharing it, appearing on it, paying for it, or buying something else from me. If you can help in any of those areas, please do. If you'd like to contact me about anything working hours, then you can email me about the show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Remember, listener, no matter what you do, it's impossible for you to understand anything that your salary depends on you not understanding. So try to work for peace and try to plan with kindness. Raise your voice, but reduce your impact. Cheers, ears. Take care out there, and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited, and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios, Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Go to western-studios.com and use the contact page on the site to drop me a message about either Working Hours or about your own Leeds podcast project. Keep up to date with Working Hours and find out about the other great Leeds podcasts that Western Studios is involved with by following Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/western_studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/western-studios. Western Studios Leeds is available to loiners to help them realise their own podcast projects for only £30 for an hour of audio podcast work or £40 for an hour of video podcast work. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com with details of your project and what support you want to get your Leeds podcast made. Whatever your podcast question or need, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.